up for Wham Baam Teslacam's Worst Drivers of California, Volume 1.
Wham Baam Teslacam, I hope you're satisfied.
Our submitter told us the impact seemed to come out of nowhere as the Lexus suddenly appeared without any time for him to avoid a collision or respond to any alerts. Police, firefighters, and paramedics all responded to the scene. There were no serious injuries, and everyone involved was able to walk away from the collision. Using our submitter's Teslacam footage, it was easy for the police to determine who was at fault. The Lexus driver had clearly run a red light, hit the Hyundai, then careened head-on into our submitter's Tesla. The insurance claim is still being processed, but based on the damage to our submitter's Model 3, it's safe to assume it will be deemed a total loss. This submitter was driving in Santa Clara, California when two drivers who appeared to be street racing caused a massive wreck that would end up shutting down the entire highway. A Nissan passed him at high speed before hitting a small bump and losing control. It smashed into the median barrier before slamming into a concrete wall on the right side of the highway. The impact sent the Nissan rolling back across the 5-lane highway before it stopped at the median barrier. Incredibly, no other vehicles were involved. Our submitter called emergency services and continued driving as he saw the wrecked car had effectively shut down the entire highway behind him. Sig 916 was driving home from work when he watched a gray Model Y veer into oncoming traffic before hitting a red Model Y, then colliding head-on with a Honda. The Honda Accord was pushed into our submitter's Model 3, making this a 4-vehicle collision, 3 of them Teslas. Incredibly, nobody was injured and everyone was able to immediately exit their vehicles, which they did before they started asking each other what had happened. Police were called to the scene, and suffice it to say, they had plenty of Teslacam footage to watch. Sig 916 only sent us the footage from his own Tesla, which is typical in these cases, but we're still holding out hope that the other Tesla owners might send us their footage too. Sig 916's Tesla was deemed a total loss by his insurance provider, and he told us he'll definitely be ordering a new one. We've got more videos out of San Francisco, and they just keep getting crazier and crazier. This one's from Josh, who was sitting at a red light when he watched a bus driver road raging with another driver. The bus swerved from the wrong side of the road and over a double solid line, nearly colliding with Josh. Apparently, the bus driver did that just so she could throw multiple full water bottles at a white SUV. That's when Josh noticed this bus company transports elderly people between nursing homes. Josh decided to follow her to her workplace so he could confront her and ask her why she would drive like that with elderly people on the bus. The situation didn't go as planned as she got very aggressive, then got help from some kid who proceeded to assault him. He filmed the entire interaction for his own safety.
He's harassing me. Sir, and I'm about to press charges on you for harassing me. No, because now he's harassing me.
It's against state law. You can't record people without their consent.
No expectation of privacy. I'm not filming you, bro.
Okay. You're harassing her.
Call the cops.
Me.
Call the cops then.
No, I don't call the cops. I'm pouring a racer. I do it.
Okay.
But I don't know what's going on there, but that's not legal. She doesn't have consent for you to record her either.
No
You're committing a
expectation
crime.
of privacy.
You're willfully committing a
Call the
crime.
cops then.
We're calling the police.
Do it. Okay. I already called them.
I know. You sure?
Don't touch me. Don't touch me, bro. Don't touch me, bro. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Oh, you're touching me now.
Don't touch me. I'm walking away from you, bro.
Yeah, you touched me.
Get out of my face, bro.
You're touching me, bro. Okay.
You assaulted me. Get out of my face.
touched me.
It's self-defense. Get the away from me.
Josh had already called the police and they quickly arrived. The kid who'd assaulted Josh then wanted Josh charged with assault after Josh pushed him away. Thankfully, the police sided with Josh. The bus driver's employer also arrived and he was very interested in seeing the Teslacam footage. The San Francisco police gave Josh an incident number. The bus driver's employer asked him to email all of his video footage. Let's hope her employer at least sent her to remedial driving school or something, because that sure was a wild ride for her elderly passengers. Michael was pulling up to an intersection when a red Model 3 ran the red light and collided with another Model 3 crossing the intersection. Michael kept going as he assumed both vehicles involved had their own Teslacam videos of the collision. Paul was driving with full self-driving enabled, testing the latest version and collecting footage for his YouTube channel, but he wasn't expecting to capture a wham bam moment.
Jesus Christ. F***ing
A Honda driver suddenly stopped to yield to pedestrians. Paul slammed on the brakes and swerved to the left as a collision warning sounded.
Jesus Christ.
At first, Paul didn't think his Tesla had touched the Honda since he hadn't felt or heard an impact, and the visualization on the screen appeared to show a gap between the two vehicles, so he continued. When the Honda driver began following him and honking, he realized they must have made contact, so he pulled over. While FSD can definitely anticipate many things, Paul told us neither he nor FSD expected that the Honda driver would suddenly stop during a right turn the way he had. Paul thinks the Honda driver had been turning too fast to begin with, then had to slam on the brakes when the pedestrian stepped off the sidewalk. Paul made 3 observations. 1. The Honda driver could have safely stopped farther to the right out of the way of traffic. 2. The setting sun made the Honda's brake lights difficult to see. And 3. The high-mounted center stoplight was practically invisible behind a dark window tint. Once they were both pulled over, the 2 drivers inspected their vehicles for damage. Paul realized he'd been the perpetrator of a reverse Honda bump. Thanks to his paint protection film, there was no damage to the paint of either car. Small smudges were easily wiped off them both. Paul decided to leave the scratch in his PPF rather than paying to get it replaced. According to the law, Paul would be considered responsible for causing this collision. Isaac rents out his brand new Model 3 Performance on Turo. An hour after this rental had started, the renter contacted Isaac to inform him they'd been involved in a collision. Isaac asked what happened, and you won't believe what they told him. As the renter was turning, they somehow began drifting to the right before smashing into a parked Honda. Isaac rushed to the scene. Police arrived quickly after he contacted them, and they began questioning the renter about what had happened. The renter told the police they'd been distracted while trying to use navigation. The police asked them if they were talking about the Tesla's built-in navigation. Nope. The renter claimed they'd been using a navigation app on their phone. The police told them that using a navigation app is not a justification for operating a phone while driving. Isaac notified Turo, and their roadside assistants towed his Tesla to a Tesla-approved body shop so it can be evaluated for repairs. They'll be covering the repair costs, minus Isaac's $1,625 deductible. When traffic ahead of Anthony began slowing to a stop, he noticed the car behind him was not slowing down, so he swerved onto the shoulder to avoid being rear-ended. Sadly, the other driver did the same thing before colliding with Anthony's Tesla, impacting the right rear wheel. Anthony's Tesla came extremely close to colliding with the vehicle ahead of him when the impact occurred. Thank goodness he pulled over when he did. Anthony checked on the other driver and found him extremely agitated, so he called 911. When the California Highway Patrol arrived, they found the other driver at fault after seeing the Teslacam footage. They also cited him for expired registration. Thankfully, nobody was injured. It took 7 months and $13,000 to repair Anthony's Tesla. He told us the worst part of the whole ordeal was having to drive a Nissan Versa while waiting for his Tesla to get fixed. Anthony told us that Wham Bam rocks, and he probably recommends you subscribe, and he told us he's thankful to be back in his Tesla. This submitter had parked his Model 3 on the streets of San Francisco one night, as evidenced by the shattered glass we can see on the sidewalk. Our submitter, however, was not the victim of a break-in. Actually, what happened to his Tesla was much worse. As a group of people walked past the car, one stopped and pointed at it. They then turned away from the car while concealing their face to hide their identity before turning back and going to work. They first approached the side of the Tesla and began keying the windows. Then they went to the front of the car. To finish things off, they also keyed the driver's side windows before walking away. The vandal had keyed the windows with Anarchy symbols and text that read, "F Tesla." As you can probably guess, our submitter had never encountered this individual before, so we have to assume this act was directed toward the car itself and not the owner. Okay, we've got to do something to catch this person. If you recognize them, send us an email at the address in the description and we'll forward the info to the police. Let's see what clues we can uncover in the footage. Obviously, we've got this clear view of the vandal's face. Evidently, they like the American hardcore punk band Gulch, and they seem to have some connection with the town of Ursa in Illinois. Can you find any other clues to their identity? Post them in the comments, and together we might be able to bring them to justice. Michael was working for Uber in San Bernardino, California. He was about to drop off a passenger when he encountered a Jeep stopped in the right lane with its hazard lights on. Without warning, the Jeep driver turned off the hazard lights and flipped a U-turn across Michael's lane. Bam! When the Jeep driver hit the brakes, Michael thought the hazard lights were still flashing. By the time he realized the left turn signal was on, it was too late for him to react. His Tesla automatically summoned first responders and a tow truck after the collision occurred. Nobody was seriously injured, but Michael did get whiplash and bruises and immediately went to the hospital. His passenger in the back seat was completely fine. The California Highway Patrol made a report after an officer arrived 5 minutes after the collision occurred. Coincidentally, the other driver was a former co-worker of Michael's that seemed to be partially impaired after leaving a Little League baseball game. Things got even more strange when the other driver refused to share his insurance information. Michael had to go to the CHP office to get a copy of the collision report for his lawyer. Both vehicles were totaled by the impact. Michael's lawyer is in communication with the other driver's insurance provider, and he told us they're negotiating for over $25,000 in property damage, over $6,000 in lost wages, and some additional injury expenses. Ivan was on his way home from work when traffic ahead of him came to a complete stop. Ivan also stopped, but the Nissan behind him didn't. The Nissan driver was not paying attention and couldn't brake in time before slamming into the back of Ivan's Model Y. Both drivers stopped on the shoulder, and Ivan called 911 to report the collision. Even though he told them his back was injured, paramedics refused to respond, but eventually a highway patrol trooper arrived. Ivan tried to get the Nissan driver's insurance information from him so he could leave and go to the hospital, but the Nissan driver refused to give it to him. Eventually, Ivan asked the patrol trooper for help. He told us the trooper couldn't care less though, and he told Ivan that everything was in order and the Nissan driver wasn't required to provide him with his insurance information. Ivan was completely baffled. Then, when he later got a copy of the police report, he found out the trooper had lied to him. Ivan told us that everything was very much not in order. The report clearly states the Nissan's registration had expired and that the driver didn't have any insurance. Ivan is convinced the trooper hid these facts from him intentionally. Ivan doesn't know why he did this, but he has a theory. He overheard the trooper and the Nissan driver speaking to each other in another language, and he thinks they knew each other. Since the other driver was illegally driving without insurance, Ivan had to file a claim with his own insurance provider. Ivan is still getting medical treatment twice per week for his back injury, which he is having to pay for out of his own pocket. Riley had left his Model Y parked outside of a grocery store in Ventura, California, when a man was thrown out of the store for shoplifting. The guy was so bent on committing crimes, he decided to key several random vehicles in the parking lot. Sentry mode on Riley's Tesla activated automatically as the vandal keyed a Toyota parked in front of it, and sadly, his Tesla was next on his hit list. The attacker dragged a key all along the passenger side of Riley's car. The police were called, and Riley gave a copy of his Sentry mode footage to the responding officer. The officer told Riley they knew who the criminal was, but since he was homeless, there wasn't any way to pursue him to pay for the damage. Instead, Riley filed a claim with his own insurance provider to get his Tesla fixed. H was entering a parking lot when he heard someone screaming at him. When he slowed down, a man riding a bicycle approached his Tesla. The man claimed H had nearly run over his kid while he was crossing the street. He apologized and told him he hadn't seen the kid before the man angrily rode away. H parked his car and went to play basketball in the park, but 5 minutes later, the angry cyclist returned on foot with a screwdriver. He even dropped the screwdriver while approaching the Tesla, but he picked it up and continued with his premeditated act of vandalism. As he walked past the Tesla, he dragged the end of the screwdriver down the passenger side. He then walked to the front of the Tesla, watching H as he played basketball. He then walked back, dragging the screwdriver down the driver's side this time and leaving a deep scratch. H had no idea this was happening at the time, but what the man didn't know was that the Tesla had captured the entire criminal incident. After he'd finished playing basketball, H returned to his Tesla and discovered the damage. When he checked his Sentry mode videos, he immediately recognized the man responsible. H called the police, then also posted this footage on a neighborhood social media app. The man's neighbors were quick to identify him. Both the police report and the insurance claim went smoothly, which makes sense in light of the video evidence H was able to provide. Justin's Tesla applied automatic emergency braking when the Honda in front of him came to a sudden stop. The Ram pickup behind Justin didn't have that feature. The Ram wasn't able to stop and slammed into his Tesla in what he calls a Ram Bam. We can't see this in the video, but Justin told us a white Model 3 behind the Ram was able to stop safely, but then it was rear-ended by a Subaru. All 4 drivers pulled over in a construction zone in the median. Nobody was injured, and the highway patrol was summoned so they could generate a collision report. The damage in the photos doesn't look too bad, but fixing it cost over $27,000 US, plus another $1,600 to replace his paint protection film. The Ram driver was ruled responsible for the collision, so his insurance provider paid for Justin's repairs, which took a month to complete. With that license plate, we're wondering what kind of life the pickup driver could be referring to. Matthew was returning to Colorado after a trip to Disneyland in California. As traffic began to back up, Elon, well, actually full self-driving, rerouted Matthew toward an exit. Suddenly, the driver of a Toyota ran into the back of his Tesla. Matthew told us the impact sounded and felt horrible. Both drivers pulled over to the side of the road. The Toyota driver eventually left her vehicle to check on Matthew and his 2 children. She wasn't insured, and neither one of them knew what to do, so they called 911. The police said they'd respond, but a tow truck came and took the Toyota away before they arrived. Matthew filmed this video of his daughter shortly after the collision. We're glad you're all okay. Matthew was able to drive home safely with FSD working fine the whole way home. He then filed a claim with his own insurance provider. Weiwei was driving down a highway in San Francisco when traffic slowed down before coming to a complete stop. The VW behind her didn't slow down or stop before it slammed into the back of her Model Y. Both drivers pulled over to the shoulder and exchanged insurance information. The VW driver initially showed Weiwei proof of insurance, but she noticed it had expired. The VW driver said it was no problem and that his daddy had him covered. The VW driver called his father, who confirmed he had valid insurance but provided Weiwei with the same ID number. The VW driver then drove away with a bent hood and left the highway. Much to Weiwei's surprise when she called the insurance company, the insurance policy was valid and active. The insurance policy covered the repairs to her Tesla, which cost $10,000 US and took 6 days to complete. While Jordan was headed home in his new Model 3, he encountered 3 pedestrians crossing against a don't walk signal while his own traffic light was green. When Jordan stopped to let them cross, one of them got upset and approached Jordan's Tesla before kicking the front and side window. Out of concern for his safety, Jordan swiftly maneuvered away, worried they might be armed or getting ready to escalate the situation. Thankfully, there was no visible damage to his car's front lid or the window where the pedestrian had struck it with her hand. What would you do in a situation like this? Would you get away or confront the attacker? Let us know in the comments. Chris was driving west on I-80 in Davis, California, when an SUV sped past him in the passing lane. Chris had FSD enabled, but when he saw the SUV driver recklessly tailgating other drivers, he took over control in anticipation of an impending high-speed collision. Even so, he wasn't ready for what was about to happen. The SUV driver suddenly swerved out of the passing lane before screeching to a halt in the Gore point. The driver then got out, dropping his hat on the ground while nearly being hit by other drivers. Chris managed to avoid hitting both the man and his hat, but moments later, the same SUV sped past him again. It doesn't look like he was raging against any other drivers. Maybe he was fighting with someone else in the SUV. Chris told us watching Wham Bam videos has prepared him for just about anything and has made him a safer driver. Thanks, Chris. You may be surprised to learn that Cybertruck drivers are generally not accepted into the community of pickup drivers, as K1 was about to find out. K1's lane was merging, and he signaled far in advance of the merge. A pickup driver in the lane next to him did not want to let him in, however. He actually sped up and matched K1's speed to block him, then finally backed off and let him merge just as his lane was ending. K1 didn't realize the Ford driver was triggered as he continued driving, but suddenly his Cybertruck veered right and his side view mirror folded in on its own. That's when K1 noticed the pickup driver pulling in front of and brake checking him. Since K1 still didn't know what was going on, he wasn't ready for the sudden braking, but his Cybertruck automatically applied emergency braking, avoiding another collision. As the poor baby got out of his pickup, K1 immediately called 911. The pickup driver claimed that K1 had cut him off, but when K1 told him the police were on their way, he remembered he had somewhere else to be. When K1 reviewed his Teslacam footage, he realized the guy had tried to sideswipe his stainless steel bulletproof pickup truck. He's very lucky the Cybertruck swerved to the right, saving his Ford Ranger from destruction. K1 sent his Teslacam footage to the police, and they looked for the driver for a while, but weren't able to locate him. K1 told us it's scary and sad that grown adults try things like this. Mr. Egg was sitting at a red light when the pickup next to him suddenly began backing up and its lowered tailgate slid under the hood of the SUV behind it. Wow, now how did that happen? Was the pickup driver trying to stab the SUV's engine? That's the sort of thing you'd expect to see on Robot Wars. NK was heading to work in Berkeley, California when he spotted a disabled vehicle blocking the two leftmost lanes of the highway. NK told us he didn't realize part of the vehicle's tire and axle was actually in his lane, and he was only barely able to avoid a collision after noticing it at the last second. He immediately called the California Highway Patrol to report the situation, and they told him they were already aware of it and dealing with it. When NK arrived at work, he talked to a coworker who'd been driving by when the collision happened. He told NK 3 men jumped out of the car and immediately fled the scene. Maybe that's why the CHP was already aware of what was going on. NK also has an aftermarket dashcam which captured the audio of his Tesla struggling to maintain traction. Speaking of dashcams, don't forget to check out our other channel, Wham Baam Dashcam, where we feature videos from dashcams on all vehicles. If you like Wham Baam Teslacam, you'll definitely enjoy Wham Baam Dashcam too. This submitter was taking her newlywed brother and sister-in-law home right after their wedding. In her side view mirror, she noticed bright headlights approaching rapidly from behind. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind pushed the approaching pickup truck and it sideswiped the driver's side of her Tesla. Our submitter honked to get the pickup driver's attention, but they sped off without any attempt to stop, making this a clear hit and run. She pulled over before waiting an hour for the California Highway Patrol to respond after they instructed her to pull over at the next exit. Thankfully, her Teslacam footage was clear enough to capture the fleeing pickup's license plate number, and our submitter provided it to the responding CHP officers. Surprisingly, the insurance information attached to the truck was still active, and the CHP provided her with the insurance details. She filed a claim with her own insurance provider, and after months of communications back and forth, the fleeing driver's insurance policy covered the whopping $8,800 repair bill. Gabe was driving his brand new Model 3 in San Francisco when he moved over to make room for double-parked cars. When he did, he watched someone throw ice cream out of the double-parked Jeep. Gabe told us he's been watching Wham Baam Teslacam for a while now, and he always knew rolling coal was a pickup driver's way of protesting Teslas, but he wonders if things have now escalated to throwing ice cream. Frank bought his Tesla Model 3 from the Hertz rental company when they recently sold many of their used Teslas for good prices. They told him the car was in great condition and had no flaws, but Frank noticed the title mentioned it had been in a collision. Hertz didn't want to tell him what kind of collision it had been in though. The car appeared to be in mint condition and the service screen showed no problems, so he went ahead with the purchase. It wasn't until later that he began hearing wind noise coming through the glass roof. On Tesla forums, he found people saying this noise is normal and suggesting placing cork between the window panes to reduce the noise, so he didn't give it much thought. Fast forward a couple of weeks. While Frank was driving the speed limit down I-880 with the windows up and the AC on, he suddenly heard a loud whoosh. Suddenly, he noticed that the rear pane of his glass roof was completely gone. Thankfully, the piece of glass landed without causing a major collision, but the computer still didn't give any warnings or notifications. The convertible just kept on driving as though nothing had happened. Both Frank and the driver who'd almost been hit by the glass roof pulled over at the next exit before sharing contact info. Frank got a repair quote for $635 to put in a new window, and he still wonders what kind of collision his Tesla had been in before he bought it from Hertz. Chip had left his Model Y parked in Forest Hill, California when Sentry mode was activated by two guys walking past it. The two guys walked up to the car parked next to Chip's and busted open the door lock. Ironically, one of the burglars began fixing the trim around the lock that had been broken off during the break-in. Sadly for them, there was nothing worth stealing in the car, and Chip's Tesla was recording the whole time. Chip told us the police are still looking for them, but if you know who they are, send us a message and we'll forward the information along. The Mac guy was driving his Model 3 in Fremont, California, when a Lexus driver made an illegal U-turn. That wasn't just illegal, it was also extremely dangerous. The Lexus driver didn't see an oncoming Honda, and the two vehicles made contact, resulting in his own vehicle getting flipped over. The Mac guy and several other drivers stopped to render aid, and first responders arrived quickly to the scene. As Jeff was exiting Highway 138, he thought he saw something off to the left as he was making his turn. When he turned to look, all he saw was a large dust cloud, so he wasn't sure what had just happened. He decided to circle back and make sure the cloud of dust hadn't been caused by a collision. This required driving for another 4 miles to get back to the same spot. By the time Jeff arrived, he noticed 2 wrecked cars and 2 confused drivers standing next to them. They all watched Jeff's Teslacam footage together to find out what had happened. Firefighters and paramedics arrived just moments later, and thanks to the footage, they had no trouble explaining the strange incident. Jackie's sister-in-law was returning home in Jackie's Tesla and was rear-ended on the highway right after dropping Jackie and his wife off at the airport. Jackie had just checked in when he got the news, which he told us was a great way to start the vacation. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Jackie still took the vacation, and he told us he'll handle the insurance process when he gets back. Donald's wife was waiting at a traffic signal on her way to pick up their kids from school when 2 motorcycle cops had set up a speed trap. They didn't have to wait long for some action. A pickup driver probably saw the cops waiting and slammed on the brakes to avoid running a red light, but the driver of a red Camaro rear-ended the pickup, pushing it across the intersection. Neither driver was hurt, and the Teslacam footage wasn't needed since the 2 cops had witnessed the whole event themselves. Donald's wife sent along this message: "Slow it down for the school zone." Kurt was driving his old Model Y on his way to pick up his new Model Y at the Tesla Center in Burbank when the SUV ahead of him began drifting into the oncoming lane. The SUV collided with another car before slowly rolling over. Kurt checked on the victim. She was shaken up and horrified, and after calling 911, Kurt stayed with her until paramedics arrived. The SUV driver was uninjured. Kurt showed his Teslacam footage to the police at the scene and later uploaded it to the LAPD for them to use as evidence in the collision investigation. Andy was driving to work when he noticed traffic ahead slowing down. He also slowed down before hearing a loud impact on his right. When he looked over, he noticed a box truck had struck a car. It wasn't until he arrived at work and reviewed his Teslacam footage that he realized how incredibly close the truck had come to hitting his Tesla. It looks like he hardly had an inch to spare. Yikes! Here's another video from San Francisco. Kyle was sitting at a red light when the bus in the bus lane got a green light. As the bus pulled away, a black SUV sporting a huge push bumper, spotlights, and a ton of extra antennas pulled up and took its spot in the bus lane. We've got to wonder what government organization owns that bus. As it turned out, the Honda driver behind it was about to find out. When the light turned green, the Honda driver followed after the black SUV, then moved over to cut Kyle off, and that's when instant justice struck. The unmarked cop lit up his party lights and pulled the Honda over, and nobody ever heard from the Honda driver again. Mateo was driving his Model S in downtown Los Angeles when he witnessed the driver of a Toyota SUV make an aggressive lane change, nearly colliding with another driver who proceeded to brake check the Toyota. Suddenly, Mateo felt an impact to the side of his Tesla. After being brake checked, the Toyota driver crossed 3 lanes before slamming into Mateo's Tesla. Mateo approached the driver and found him pretty shaken up. He apologized right away and told Mateo he'd been distracted by the other driver brake-checking him and hadn't noticed Mateo. Mateo told us the driver was pretty young, perhaps 18, and that this was his first collision and he had no idea what to do. Mateo had just moved to the United States, so this was his first collision as a US citizen, and he didn't know what to do either. In hindsight, he says it was pretty funny that they were both asking the other what they should do. In the end, it all got sorted out, with the Toyota driver admitting fault. Mateo is now waiting for his scheduled appointment at a repair shop. Jonathan's neighbor was getting something out of his back seat when a Toyota Corolla smashed into his driver's door, missing him by inches. Jonathan, who was inside his house, looked out his front door to see what had happened. He then told his neighbor to give his Tesla's door handle a pull so Sentry mode would save the recording. Good idea. The Corolla driver just took off without stopping. An hour later, Jonathan was leaving to visit a supercharger when he spotted the Corolla driving through the neighborhood, evidently looking for the car they'd hit. Jonathan flagged her down and put her in touch with his neighbor. The Corolla driver was 88 years old and she didn't even realize she'd almost crushed someone. Danny was driving through an intersection with a green light when a Kia driver ran their red light. Danny's phone automatically summoned police to his location and they arrived less than 2 minutes later. Danny went to the hospital to get checked out, but in the end, he didn't have any serious injuries. The same couldn't be said about his Tesla. His insurance provider quickly deemed his Model Y a total loss before cutting him a check for over $49,000 US. He told us he's already spent it on a new Tesla Model X. Ace was driving his Model Y through his neighborhood and was only 30 seconds from home when a neighbor crashed into his quarter panel. At first, he was shocked and wasn't sure what had happened or how this could have happened. When he reviewed his Teslacam footage, he saw that the other driver approached a yield sign at high speed. Then, rather than yielding, she tried to cross the intersection, hitting his Tesla instead. Both of them stopped. The other driver admitted fault and told Ace that she hadn't seen him, but that her insurance would cover the repairs. At first, her insurance provider only estimated the repair cost at less than $7,000 US using photos and videos. But when Ace took his Tesla to a shop, the estimate nearly doubled to $13,000. This submitter was driving home on Interstate 10 in Colton, California, when another driver suddenly stopped in front of him. He stood on the brakes in an attempt to stop, but he couldn't avoid crashing into the back of the other car. Moments after they both pulled over, the other driver fled the scene while our submitter was still on the phone with emergency operators. Sadly, the license plate number wasn't visible in the Teslacam footage, and the police are still searching for the other vehicle. Our submitter told us that any help locating the driver responsible would mean the world to him, as it would get him out of paying his insurance deductible. The repair bill came to $9,200 US, and he hopes it won't take too long to get his Tesla fixed. The question we have is, what was the other driver even doing? They pulled over to the right before diving for the median, but only to stop in front of our submitter. Was this an insurance fraud attempt? Did they cause the collision intentionally, then take off after realizing they'd been hit by a Tesla loaded with cameras? Let us know your theory in the comments. We've seen an increase in Tesla versus Tesla road rage incidents in the last couple of weeks, as our next video will demonstrate. First of all, we just want to say, take it easy out there, Tesla drivers. This submitter's father was heading toward the Bay on I-580. Traffic was flowing smoothly until a Model Y Performance entering the on-ramp crossed 5 lanes of the 7-lane highway. The Model Y abruptly cut into a small gap, setting off the collision warning sensors of our submitter's Model 3, even though the left lane was clear. The situation frustrated our submitter's father, especially considering everything was going fine until this Model Y showed up, but he chose not to escalate. Later, as they both approached an exit, the Model Y driver seemed to have mellowed out. We're sure that had nothing to do with the fact that this section of California State Route 84 tends to have police presence during this time of day. That's when our submitter's father saw an opportunity for some payback. He noticed the Model Y was speeding up, seemingly in an attempt to cut in front of him before he passed a semi-truck on his right. Instead, he accelerated, closing the gap and blocking the Model Y. The Model Y driver then began tailgating him aggressively, and when he got uncomfortably close, our submitter's father brake-checked him before speeding up next to the semi, making it obvious his actions were deliberate. After a while, the Model Y driver illegally sped past him between the lanes. At one point, they started weaving within their lane, almost like the traffic brakes we've seen CHP officers perform to slow down traffic. When the traffic light turned green, the Model Y driver didn't move, perhaps trying to provoke our submitter's father, but he didn't take the bait. Our submitter told us that road raging is a generational habit passed down from his father and from his father. He said they know exactly how to provoke other drivers and how to avoid giving other road ragers satisfaction. Weird flex, but okay. The Model Y then sped off, but then the driver slowed down when they came to a construction zone where traffic had been reduced to a single lane in each direction. After the construction zone ended, the Model Y driver floored the juice pedal and took off. Rather than chiming in with our own opinions, we'll leave it up to you to decide who was in the wrong in this situation. Serena was driving her Model Y when the driver ahead of her was distracted by his phone and wasn't watching the road. When the road ahead began to curve, the other driver continued straight and ran over the curb. That must have caused some horrible curb rash. With the damage done to the curb, imagine what happened to the wheels. Of course, he shouldn't have been using his phone while driving, but I bet he also wishes he'd protected his wheels. This rain took to the travel lane to pass slow traffic in the passing lane, including a Corvette. When the Corvette driver realized he was being passed by a Cybertruck, he felt challenged and sped up before flying past it. Sadly for him, there was an unmarked police vehicle waiting up ahead to give him his award for winning this little competition. Now that instant justice was served ice cold. Rain told us that he loves the Cybertruck so far, and he and his girlfriend love watching Wham Bam videos every Sunday. Let's take a look at another video he sent us. This time, the driver of an oncoming GMC was so impressed by the Cybertruck, he tried to give Rain a high five. See, not everybody hates the Cybertruck. Rain told us he can't wait to send us more videos. Chad watched a white pickup truck ahead of him suddenly lurch to one side as one of its wheels wrenched free. The pickup driver fought for control after the wheel decided to forge its own path. Meanwhile, the escaped wheel bounced over the median barrier and headed straight into oncoming traffic. Several drivers swerved to avoid hitting it, but one wasn't quick enough. The wheel struck the car head-on before bouncing back over the median barrier. Chad's Teslacam captured the chaos as the wheel disappeared from view. Thankfully, the three-wheeled pickup truck made it safely to the shoulder. Please excuse these next two videos for being phone recordings. Sadly, the submitters no longer have access to the original files. Still, this footage is too incredible not to show you. Xander and his family were driving to the airport when suddenly the unthinkable happened. An oncoming vehicle suddenly crossed over and struck their Model X head-on, spinning it around and sending it into a ditch where it became high-centered with the family of 6 inside. Thankfully, this insane collision only left some of them with small seatbelt bruises and airbag burns. The other guy smacked his head on his steering wheel, but he was also completely fine. The Tesla automatically called emergency services, and when they arrived, Xander and his family were checked out by paramedics before leaving the Tesla behind and continuing to the airport so they wouldn't miss their flight. Sadly, the Model X was totaled, but a week after the collision, Xander had replaced it. Tanner was driving his Model 3 when... Wait, what was that? Are we getting seasick or something? Nope, that really is an amphibious car passing Tanner. Tanner told us he thought it looked like SpongeBob's boatmobile, and he had to park to check his Teslacam footage to see if he'd just imagined it. Richard and his wife were stopped at a traffic light when an oncoming pickup truck lost control, jumped the center barrier, and slammed into the back corner of another truck. It hit so hard that it knocked the other truck sideways. Then the pickup driver who'd caused the collision fled the scene, but Richard's Teslacam captured its license plate number as it drove by. The other pickup driver then flipped a U-turn at the traffic light before speeding after the hit-and-run driver. Richard called the police non-emergency number and asked if they wanted his Teslacam footage. Later that night, they stopped by his house and he downloaded the video from his Tesla and provided them with a copy. The police told Richard that the victim was unable to catch the fleeing driver, but thanks to his Teslacam footage, they'd be able to file a claim with the other driver's insurance provider. We were hoping for an arrest, but still, Teslacam saves the day again. Oscar also encountered some debris, but he wasn't able to avoid hitting it. As he was changing lanes, a wild ladder suddenly appeared before him. The back wheel of his Tesla hit the ladder, sending it bouncing. Thankfully, his car wasn't damaged by the impact. It looks like Oscar wasn't the first driver to hit the ladder that morning. The most common Tesla hate videos we receive are still the coal rolling videos like this next one that Tim sent us. Let's roll some more. Clips, of course, not coal. We'll let you be the judge of whether these pickups are hot or not. Joey was driving home from school in San Diego. There was some traffic, but Joey told us this wasn't out of the ordinary. The driver of a silver Honda merged behind Joey and began tailgating him when traffic slowed down. The Honda driver wasn't maintaining a safe following distance, and when traffic slowed down a second time, say it with me now, Honda bump. Joey's Tesla was completely stopped when the impact of the Honda shoved it forward into a Mustang Mach-E. All involved drivers pulled over to exchange information before Joey went home and made an insurance claim. He told us his insurance provider did a great job handling his claim and arranging to pay over $11,000 in parts and labor to fix his Tesla. He also wanted to shout out his girlfriend, Maddie. Mario was driving. HSC was using FSD on a surface street, and the navigation indicated a left turn coming up in less than a mile. FSD maneuvered into the left lane, and that's when the driver of a Ram pickup using FHD, full human driving, began following him. FSD was maintaining a good speed and following distance before safely stopping when a traffic light ahead turned yellow. The pickup driver was so triggered by HSC's safe and careful driving that he got out of his car, walked up to the Tesla, and informed HSC that he was driving in the fast lane. He then shouted, "Fast, medium, slow," while pointing to the various lanes that all have the same speed limit on a road that is definitely not a highway and does not have passing, travel, or exit lanes. He returned to his pickup, and when the light turned green, he used what he had called the slow lane to speed past other traffic, only to get stopped at the next traffic light. HSC told us he saw no reason to inform the police of the pickup driver's stupidity, so he just kept going and ignored him. He also told us that in 54 years of driving, he's never had something like this happen before. I'm amazed. I encounter pickup drivers all the time who don't know the rules of the road. Our next submitter didn't include a lot of information about this video, and we haven't been able to reach them to find out more. A vehicle on the other side of the highway lost control, collided with the median, and launched some unknown debris directly into the cabin of Jack's Model Y. Jack was able to safely pull over before taking this picture of the damage. Imagine if that had impacted the driver's side of the windshield. We hope nobody was injured in this incident. Oh, and Jack, if you're watching, check your spam folder. Max was on his way home after picking up 2 avocados for $1 at a roadside fruit stand. He was riding in his Model S Plaid with full self-driving enabled and was discussing with his father in the passenger seat what a great bargain they'd gotten on the avocados. As the self-driving Tesla began slowing itself down for a red light, they noticed that a human-driven Jeep was not slowing down. The Jeep slammed into the back of the Tesla at a speed that Max estimates between 40 and 50 miles per hour. FSD swerved around the car ahead of them after being shoved forward. Max told us the Jeep driver had fallen asleep, and since his Jeep had no advanced driver assistance features, it wasn't able to help him avoid this devastating collision. Max called 911, and 2 cop cars and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Max and his father were shaken up, but uninjured. Together, they concluded that those were the most expensive avocados they'd ever purchased. In addition to the $1 US, they also cost 1 Tesla Model S Plaid. After all, they never would have been hit by that Jeep if they hadn't stopped for the avocados. This submitter was sitting at a red light in his brand new Model Y. When the light turned green, he slowly started entering the intersection when, wham! A pickup driver from the left had run their red light and T-boned our submitter's Tesla. Both drivers were able to walk away from the collision, and it came as no surprise to our submitter that the insurance provider chose to total his Tesla. Quasi was driving his Model Y down a highway in San Diego when he suddenly spotted his exit and quickly merged over. He confesses he zoned out, and before he knew it, he was approaching the turn too fast. Wazzy chose to slam on the brakes, worried about what would happen if he couldn't make the turn. Thankfully, the brakes performed admirably, slowing him down just before he reached the dirt area before the highway. It was a close call, but Wazzy told us he's glad he managed to avoid what could have been a fatal mistake. After this incident, Wazzy invested in full self-driving. Now, his car drives him around, keeping everyone safe from his questionable driving skills. Wazzy told us that the main reason he sent us this video was as a sobering reminder to other drivers to stay focused. Life can change or end in the blink of an eye. This submitter was driving his week-old Tesla Model 3 when a Bentley driver pulled out without looking, coming within inches of hitting him. That could have been a very expensive collision. Our submitter passed her a few blocks later, and that's when he saw that she was on her phone. Shocker! Alex was on his way to the gym and had just entered the highway when he instinctively merged over to his usual lane. Suddenly, a van driver veered left to avoid a disabled vehicle in the exit lane. The van plowed into a coned-off zone before spinning out of control and colliding with the median barrier. Alex pulled over and immediately called 911 before getting out and making sure everyone was okay. Thankfully, both the driver and passenger of the disabled vehicle were okay, and they remained on the shoulder after getting out of the vehicle. The driver of the van that had spun out checked for damage before leaving the scene. Police had already been called and showed up moments later. Alex left as they were arriving, but he told us everyone was safe. Ashley was driving her Model Y down Highway 101 in San Rafael, California. She took an exit when a Prius driver made a late lane change and slammed on the brakes. Ashley and the driver in front of her both followed suit, but the driver of the pickup behind Ashley didn't. Ashley was rear-ended, and the incident nearly became a full-blown pileup when the pickup was almost rear-ended by a van. The danger wasn't over yet. After Ashley pulled over to wait for the police, another collision occurred, which she also captured on her Teslacam. Sadly, her rear Teslacam had been damaged in the earlier collision, so this second impact was only captured with the side camera. Ashley provided a copy of this footage to the other party. She filed a claim with the pickup driver's insurance provider. Fixing her Tesla took a month and cost $23,000 US. Dom was on his way to work when an old lady drove straight into his Cybertruck. A local news reporter found out about the Cybertruck crash and rushed to the scene, no doubt excited to show a wrecked Cybertruck on the front page, but he was in for a shock. While the old lady's Toyota Camry was absolutely obliterated, Dom's Cybertruck was almost completely untouched. The only damage was some scratches on the plastic bumper cover. The journalist even wrote, "Looks more like a Toyota Camry hit a Sherman tank." He ended his article with, "Note to self, don't get in an accident with a Cybertruck." Dom confirmed that driving a Cybertruck feels like driving a tank. He's thankful that nobody was injured in the collision. The Camry was totaled by the impact, and Dom is now waiting to find out when he can get his bumper cover replaced at a Tesla service center. Kimmy Cheeks was driving northbound on Highway 101 in Los Angeles when Mad Max started pulling up quickly behind her. The fast-approaching vehicle suddenly spun out of control after the hood flipped up and obstructed the driver's view. Kimmy Cheeks' boyfriend saw what was happening and shouted to warn her, so she punched the juice pedal to avoid being hit. Phew, that was a close one, but look at the existing damage to the vehicle. Obviously, this wasn't its first rodeo. We actually had trouble figuring out what it was. Is it a Porsche Cayenne? If you can identify it, post your answer in the comments. Andrew was driving with supervised full self-driving engaged. He was on his way to Little Caesars to get lunch for him and his roommates, but he had no idea this trip would turn his life upside down. A Prius driver, distracted by something in her passenger seat, veered into Andrew's lane and struck his Tesla head-on. The Tesla automatically called 911, and while first responders were still on the way, bystanders helped Andrew out of the vehicle. The Prius driver was acting very suspiciously. While only partially dressed, she seemed to be avoiding the situation by making her way to the sidewalk. Andrew was taken away in an ambulance and had to stay under medical supervision for 8 days, resulting in a $16,000 US medical bill. When a police officer came to the hospital and gave him the Prius driver's insurance info, he immediately called the number.
Hello. Hello, is this Alexis?
That's when he discovered that the Prius driver had given the cops a fake number. He then read the police report and found out she'd been wearing an ankle bracelet and GPS tracker. What he found out next hit him like a ton of bricks. The Prius driver was uninsured. Without uninsured motorist coverage, this left him on the hook for paying his medical bills. If you don't know, uninsured motorist coverage protects you if you're involved in a collision with a driver who's illegally driving without required insurance. It can help cover medical expenses and missed wages. In contrast, Andrew's own insurance coverage only covered the repairs to his Tesla. The local Tesla certified body shop estimated the repair costs at $46,000 before his insurance provider decided to total it.
Bon voyage, old friend.
Scott was in a turn lane when he noticed a sign under the traffic signal indicating there were 2 turn lanes up ahead. When it was safe, he maneuvered into the outer turn lane. The driver of a truck tried to do the same, speeding up when he saw Scott pulling into the turn lane before slamming on his horn. Scott merged back into the other turn lane as the other driver seemed pretty angry, but the guy matched Scott's move. He then got out of his truck, screaming profanities at Scott before punching the Tesla's window. Scott told us the punch was so hard, he's surprised, but thankful, the window didn't shatter. The pickup driver then got back in his truck before both drivers sat there, awkwardly waiting for the light to turn green. When the light turned green, Scott turned down a side street just to be sure the pickup driver didn't follow him. Chris could have used a boatmobile when he encountered flash floods and high winds during his evening commute. Other drivers had slowed down to drive through standing water, and when it came to his turn, a semi-truck with an oversized load came barreling down the emergency lane and nearly flooded his Model Y. Chris told us he didn't even realize where the water was coming from until the trucker got back into a legal lane. I'd say rolling floodwaters are definitely an escalation over rolling coal. Isaac was driving in Big Sur, California, when a rock approximately the size of a tire came tumbling down the cliffside and nearly smashed into the vehicle ahead of him. When those signs warn about falling rocks, they aren't kidding. If you enjoy seeing crazy things captured on camera, be sure to check out our newest channel, Wham Baam Security Cam. In this video, we put together the 25 craziest videos we've featured so far to get you started.